Good morning, everyone. And John, thanks very much for the welcome. The University of New South Wales, obviously our key partner in this conference, so it's great to have had John to say a few words of introduction. Now, of course, my boss, the Joint Force Authority, the Vice Chief of Defence, Vice Admiral Ray Griggs, was hoping to be here this morning to open with the first keynote. Unfortunately, he's acting Chief of Defence Force at the moment, got a pretty busy schedule ahead of him. There's plenty on his script at the moment. But on his behalf then, I certainly do welcome you here and note that he will be in this afternoon, ideally, to have a chat to us, certainly about his key role in the work that's occurring after the First Principles Review, and specifically about his evolving role as the Joint Force Authority. So we look forward to hearing from Vice Admiral Briggs this afternoon. As I've said, on his behalf, though, I'm very pleased to welcome you. I'm sure you're all pretty much conference fatigued. A pretty impressive, I believe, and successful Pacific Conference and Expo last week. So I very much appreciate the effort that you've taken to come along and have listened to the force design elements. And I recognise a fairly broad audience, not just from Australia, but as Dubbo said, from around our international partners and interested stakeholders. But certainly industry, academia, we've got defence members, we've got decision makers, practitioners, innovators, researchers, and really all about collaborating at our inaugural Force Design Conference to work out how we can do things a little better from a force design perspective. We do plan to talk on a broad range of topics, ranging from experimentation, wargaming, innovation, options development methodologies, and that'll be conducted over today and tomorrow. And keenly, we're certainly looking forward to the industry inputs that will come about tomorrow. I too would acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and pay my respect to their elders, both past and present. And of course, in the current op tempo, I also acknowledge and pay my respect to those Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders that are actually on operations with us, both in the past and currently serving and indeed deployed. So today we've got a number of focused presentations, pretty much focusing from defence and senior leadership of defence and my key executive staff that are responsible for assessing and having a look at that level of activity of our current force and assessing that to see what we need to do to design a balanced and affordable future force. That is all focused on providing our government with a capable, agile and potent force. And those words are very clearly written in our white paper. So we'll plan today to outline to you how Defence conducts force design as part of the new so-called capability life cycle, and we'll highlight key linkages that we believe to industry and academia are necessary and where they fit within what we've termed the Defence Capability Assessment Program, or the DCAP. Now, throughout my discussion this morning and throughout the day, you'll hear plenty of words that we've said before. So at the risk of repeating them, I think they're important words that we need to use to make sure that we have a common language and a common understanding about what we're trying to achieve. As well as talking about those force design elements, I also have on the program the opportunity to talk about our defence innovation priorities and the issues associated with the sovereign industry capability framework. And it's those key elements that are most important to us in terms of our engagement, certainly with industry and academia. Force design, the Force Design Conference, FD17, is focused on collaboration. Now, that's a term that we all use, but whether we actually are able to practice it sufficiently is really important to the work that I think we need to do in force design to deliver on those outcomes for that capable, agile and potent joint force. So we're seeking to engage with industry and academia on capability and force structure priorities, resulting certainly from our recent and continuing assessment of current and emerging gaps and opportunities. Thank you again to those of you that have taken the time and effort to submit proposals. We had a good high return on a number of proposals to foster the discussion on collaboration between us, industry and academia. Now tomorrow, industry and academia have the chance to present some of those, and we're very much looking forward to that interaction. So I hope you can stay with us for that part of the conference. I certainly look forward to hearing your ideas through those forums. Now I note that we did have a number of proposals. We couldn't select all of them, and those that we didn't select, I intend to progress further forward. Collaboration doesn't end at the end of this conference. It needs to continue, and we intend to progress forward and continue to engage with those that had other proposals that weren't necessarily selected for presentation tomorrow. So we will still plan and aim to take action on and use of those some of those presentations as we get the opportunity. Also today, a significant opportunity and significant aspect for us is the release of the Capability Lifecycle Detailed Design. So this is the formative document that we used when we did First Principles Review to try and understand how we would design the so-called new Capability Lifecycle in order to deliver on First Principles Review. I think most of you have probably been waiting to see that document. So we're looking forward to being able to share that with you, and the Director General, Force Options and Plans Branch, Brigadier Jason Blaine, partnered by the Assistant Secretary, Investment Portfolio Management Branch, Pat Hetherington, will speak to you about this a little later on in the conference, and they'll provide you some copies that you can take with you. We certainly aim to put that up on our Defence website as we push that out through appropriate levels of media and mediums to make sure that it's available. And there's nothing really surprising about this detailed design. It's common sense. What we've documented here is common sense and how we evolve over time. So if anyone sees any great surprises in there, then I would be surprised. But certainly we would seek your feedback on that when you have a read through it. Now, my role as Head of Force Design is to help provide the strategic capability narrative for what we will need to meet our future security needs. To do that, I maintain a direct command relationship with the Vice Chief of Defence, and certainly in his role as the Joint Force Authority, and we'll hear more about that later, but also as his role as the Chair of the Defence Investment Committee. And my work is to help design the future force and then recommend capability priorities to the Vice Chief, and priorities that will allow us to remain within our allocated budget envelope. And as we know, doesn't matter how much money you have or don't have, priorities are going to be essential to make sure we can live within our means, and that's a key part of the work that I do. Force Design the Force Design Division has been structured to distribute the functions that we need to perform across two key branches. The first one is the Force Analysis Branch, the second, Force Options and Plans Branch, and importantly, we are then also supported by the Investment Portfolio and Management Branch. And that branch is lodged with us, but reports direct to the Vice Chief and supports the work that we do, and indeed we support back for the work that the Investment Portfolio and Management Branch needs to do. Now I'll let the Director Generals and the Directors themselves speak to that during the day when they get the opportunity to take the stage. But it's the important functions and roles that they perform that allow us to perform that function of force design. And this is where this conference we aim to get into a bit of the detail for you to understand how the mechanics and the workings of the division actually do stack up. And the division was stood up in April 16 as a result of the First Principles Review to achieve a joint force by design that meets government direction. To do that requires clear leadership from the strategic centre, and that was an emphasis of the First Principles Review, was a strong strategic centre. And that leadership in the strategic centre, as I've said, is represented by the Joint Force Authority through our Vice Chief of Defence. In doing this, we can't allow investments in capabilities that don't or won't integrate with the joint force. And indeed, we need to consider that across our key partners and allies. We also need to ensure, as I've said, that they fit within an appropriate balance of investment priorities. Likewise, we can't afford to be inefficient in our decision timelines. And we can't afford to fail at being agile in response to rapidly developing technology, changing threats and changing strategic circumstances. And the current strategic environment is a clear demonstration of that. The accountability of the Vice Chief as the Joint Force Authority will provide clear direction to the Strategic Centre, or from the Strategic Centre, for what we're calling the top-down design. The capability managers, specifically the services, but also including the intelligence capability manager and the new established Joint Capabilities Group and the Chief of Joint Capabilities as a capability manager in his own right. Together with the delivery agencies, they will then get on with providing that bottom-up innovation to meet the top-down design to ensure that we get efficient and effective capability delivery and sustainment. And I emphasise that term sustainment. It's not just about acquisition and delivery of the capabilities, it's about how we plan for this through the life of type of a capability and the investment that we need to consider, understand and then implement in terms of sustainment. Clear accountabilities are recognised to this approach, and with a continued focus on culture and behaviour, we need to engender transparency and a collegiate approach. And it's these accountabilities that are front and centre in the delivery of the One Defence model. Another key element that's resulted from the refocused first principles review is the capability lifecycle itself. Pretty standard, I think, in terms of world standards. It's a 4-phase decision-based process made up of strategy and concepts, risk mitigation and requirement setting, acquisition, and then finally in-service and disposal. Now, specifically, the strategy and concepts phase is where my division's outputs are focused, and it's what my team will talk about with you today. Specifically in the strategy and concepts phase, then, it's where we identify needs from our assessment of the Defence's ability to meet the stated missions and how that might be achieved within the given funding envelope. The key output of this phase is what we call the capability program narrative, which distills the sources of strategic guidance, such as the white paper, distills those down into the essential what and why we need to do to provide direction to capability managers so that they can then go and investigate and articulate the how. How will they deliver this? And it's the first step in a transparent and traceable decision process. While the bulk of our efforts are focused on the strategy and concepts phase, we must take a holistic view across the whole of the capability lifecycle. We need to be able to understand all elements across that life cycle of a capability so that we can adapt to evolving threats and the gaps and opportunities that may result as we do that analysis. As I've stated earlier, the force design cycle that we're using is a concept that fits within the strategy and concepts phase at the start of the capability life cycle. And it's a methodology that, based on common sense, simply works to assess, understand, design, and then decide on the best force design that we can meet or use to meet our capability priorities. The Defence Capability Assessment Program, or DCAP then, is the means and the program of activities by which we deliver the concepts of the force design cycle. The DCAP enables my division to identify, assess, prioritise the capability gaps and opportunities in both the current and the future force structure. The outcome is the development of force options, the potential inclusion in the plan to deliver against our force structure, and that is the integrated investment program. And that's aligned with our decision points to inform an integrated investment program biannual update to government. Inputs to that process will be collected across the full range of stakeholders, including government, capability managers, and industry. The output will be evidence-based, prioritised and robust capability investment recommendations for the decision makers within the strong strategic centre. My division has identified, assessed and prioritised gaps and opportunities against our current and future force and will design capability-based responses to better meet the requirements to defend Australia and its interests. We'll submit this information to government to endorse our future force structure, and the aim is to continue to do this as business as usual. We can no longer rely on episodic activities based around a force structure review and a white paper when government call on it, and certainly after elections when we've seen historical case of those occurring. Now, the Defence Capability Assessment Program has three modes of operation, and Jason will go into detail on these, the primary one being the annual mode, which is our normal routine business, and that's the activity that we've currently got rolling to review and assess throughout the year to make iterative adjustments to the integrated investment program. We then also have what we call the fundamental mode, with our plan to conduct that, or be prepared to conduct that, on about a 4-yearly basis, or when directed. And that's used to do more fundamental assessments and address future force gaps and opportunities that may need to have a more significant change to our force structure. And then, of course, the final mode is the agile mode, where we'll do rapid assessment of specific gaps and opportunities as they emerge that might require a resolution inside that annual cycle. And we'll discuss those in more detail throughout the day. Now, most importantly, we've got a lot of work to do. We're looking to professionalise our organisation rather than just pull people in and co-opt them for that episodic force structure review that we've done in the past. It's about bringing people in and professionalising across the whole One Defence team, not just uniform, but APS and contractors to assist in delivering on our force design needs. This process and that professionalisation will take some years to mature, but improvements will be achieved through incremental development of the DCAP itself, using the annual cycle to get practice and understand how it works. And we expect to see success in the next white paper force structure review through a stronger joint engagement and a broader understanding across defence, government, industry and academia as we deliver on this outcome. Force design is not about the strategic centre determining force requirements in splendid isolation, and I'm sure you've heard me use those words before. We can't and won't operate in a vacuum. The culture and behaviours across the One Defence model are key to what we do, and good relationships between force design and its key stakeholders are critical to achieving that best outcome. We'll draw on experts and information sources both from within the department and beyond. In particular, we'll work closely with the service chiefs and the group heads, and they play a vital role in providing input into force design, as well as a critical role in shaping the design of the future force. All of you and they are the experts in your domains. We respect that, and we need your collective collaboration and engagement to tell the story. And getting that narrative right is vital to the success of what we're trying to achieve. Now, I'll quote an old mate of mine, Air Vice Marshal Warren McDonald, and he said this in a conference, I believe, when he was the Deputy Chief of Air Force, and they equally apply now in his new role as the Chief of Joint Capabilities. And he said, "My aim is to make sure our personnel at all levels are comfortable dealing with industry and show leadership in engaging with them and building mature and equal relationships." Now, I think that's a pretty good statement, and it's a pretty good challenge, and it's something that we certainly need to live to, and it's something that I'm committing to. I hope to see more ADF personnel embedded in industry over time to gain a greater understanding between our two spheres. This all needs to be aligned with our One Defence behaviours. We're all involved in creating a common culture of innovation, contributing to being inclusive and building teams that include academia, tri-service members, APS and industry. And this important aspect of organisational culture emerges from a range of factors including language, unspoken attitudes and norms, openness to change, and the incentives that shape behaviour and interactions of staff. Now, it's these organisational qualities and competencies that will make or break our collaboration. After all, people motivated to achieve the best will address gaps or failures of practice or strategy and seek opportunities to improve. Those that aren't won't do that, and they will also not use the tools of collaboration effectively. As I have previously mentioned many times, the art for us is to make the complex simple and the simple compelling. And it needs to be compelling for the department's senior decision makers and, of course, translating that to government. One challenge for the complexity of defence business in this regard is around which path we might take for determining our future force. And this is an issue that I think we'd certainly like to talk to industry about. Do we follow a decisive design to track direct to what we think might be a future operating environment? Or do we follow an emergent design where we're continually updating, we adapt and adjust along the way? I guess more along a spiral development process. The question that my staff and I have discussed is, what will the force of 2040 look like? And how brave are we? Do we think we'd ever get a force that we don't recognise the shape of now? Or do we end up with a force that we just continually evolve what we currently know, and it's just evolving the current shape of the force that we have? Certainly in the past, that's what we've done. It will probably be a mix of both, and we'll need both in response to the risk and budgetary constraints that we have, and indeed potentially what technology may be available. So how do we do and achieve a supportive mix of both? And how do we take advantage of technology and new opportunities, defining moments, innovative thought to move forward to get that war winner that we really seek? In order to achieve the best capability and inspire local innovation, we need to work in partnership with industry, with the focus on being both innovative and agile. So innovation is a process, not an outcome, and capability should guide the process, seek to ensure risks are managed and that industry efforts are measured and investment focused. So while the last thing that we want is to go down the wrong path, pouring money and resources into the wrong area, we also must be mindful and prepared to manage risk so that we can achieve the most possible out of innovation opportunities. So I'd like to enlist your collective wisdom to help the ongoing professionalism of our workforce, to evolve those world-class tools, the techniques and methodologies that we need in our journey, so that every soldier, sailor, airman and airwoman will have continued access to the best capability system solutions at the right time and at the right location. And most importantly, our approach and the not just the methodologies and techniques, but our mindsets and how we think. That's certainly where I need your collaborative input. Now, I bring an operator's view to this. And in the business of warfighting, I've said this many times, I don't want a level playing field. So in the past, when I had the opportunity, when I strapped my pink body into that grey aeroplane, I wanted to make sure it was the best on the block. We, as fighter pilots, would pride ourselves in being the best fighter pilot and having the best skills of all our colleagues. I don't want our future warfighters to have to rely on that. I want them to have the best kit, and then certainly we can apply their professional mastery to ensure that we remain the most effective and competent that we can be. So with your feedback, that of your staff and your colleagues, I think we can do that, and I think we can continue to evolve our force into the future and or take some bold steps where necessary to provide masterful solutions and recommendations through to government. Collaborating and partnership between us all will be the key. So please make the most out of these next 2 days. It's not just about what we stand up and present to you, it's also about who and what you talk to during the break, so make the most of those. We look forward in the panel and question sessions to trying to engage at that point. And I certainly emphasise that I look forward to hearing from you after the conference, continuing to work together and collaborating throughout the coming year. And I can't end the collaboration at the end of this conference. It's just the start. It's the opportunity for me to talk to you all about it with my key staff and get an understanding as to how we can make this better for the future.